Hello, people. Today, I've got an awesome guest for you guys. He's a world-renowned researcher. He's very well known, has written a lot of interesting research. He's an expert on marketing and a few other points that we're going to talk today. You guys know that I'm from marketing myself, so of course it's a very egoistical topic that we're going to cover today and to try to get as much information out of him as possible. Dr. Kahle, welcome. Thank you very, very much for your time, for taking the time to be a guest on this show. Thank you very much. If possible, would you please tell the audience with a few words so they know what your research is and who you are?
So I'm a professor emeritus at the University of Oregon. I got my PhD from the University of Nebraska, and I did a postdoc at University of Michigan. And I've spent most of my career at University of Oregon as a faculty member in the College of Business.
Awesome, awesome. As we said, I've got prepared a research so much. I've got multiple pages full of questions. I know we won't get to all of them. I know. But I want to dive right into it to get as much value out of you as possible. That's why I'm saying thank you very much once more that you're here. I would like to discuss with you the consumer values evolution. It's like a very interesting topic that you talk about. Let's dive into the basics of the basics first. Customer values, why are they important? What are they? And in marketing, how do we find out what they are and how do we work with them?
So Milton Rokeach was a famous psychologist who said the most important construct in all of psychology is social values, that we make a lot of our decisions based on our social values. Imagine that you're trying to decide about a new job and you just graduated from college and you have 3 job offers, and which is really wonderful. You're happy. You have to make this decision. And one of the choices for a job is paying you really good money, money more than you thought you would make. And you're really happy about the salary. Another one doesn't have such a good salary, but it's in a place you've always wanted to live. So, maybe all your life you've dreamed of having a job on a tropical island, and this is a job in Hawaii or Canary Islands. And then also the third thing might be you're offered a job that's where your friends and family live, in the town you grew up in, and you know a lot of people there, and all of your relatives live there. So you have this dilemma. Do you take the job with good pay? Do you take the job with good lifestyle, or do you take the job with friends and family? And how you decide that is going to tell a lot about your values. You're going to think about what is really important to me. How important is money versus how important is friends versus how important is lifestyle?
Interesting.
So in decision making, oftentimes you revert to values when you're trying to decide between choices, and that's true with products also. Or services, if you're trying to buy something, you think, what do I really care about? And if you have to decide between 2 things, maybe your kid wants a new tennis racket and you want a new pair of sneakers, and you can only afford one of the 2. You might have to decide which is more important, getting the tennis racket for my kid or getting the sneakers for me.
Interesting. And with those values, because especially important are these values when it becomes an either or situation. As you said, if I can buy both of it, then it doesn't matter. If I can take both offers, it doesn't matter. But the question is, when we get the situations where we can only either go with X or with Y, and they are contradictory or like different, it shows a lot of our values, which choice we make. Well, that's a given. I think that all the views can understand that. It's quite easy to understand. But what are these values? Are there like millions of these values? Could we say, no, there's a small subset? What kind of abstract categories of values do exist? Is there anything you could say about that?
Sure. Milton Rokeach again said that there were about 18 values, and he had a list of 18 core values that he thought were important. We reduced it down to a list of 9 values that we thought were important. Some of the values that he had, we thought were societal values that really don't necessarily impact you on a day-to-day basis. So one of his values, for example, was world of peace. And most of us think world peace is a good thing, but it probably doesn't influence when we're trying to decide what brand of toothpaste to buy.
Yeah.
Maybe once in a while, but and also some of the values that he had were sort of overlapping or contradictory. So we reduced it down to a list of 9 values. We call it the list of values, or LOV for short. So you could say that the work we do is a labor of love. But we use the list of values to ask people what values are important to them. Sometimes when you're dealing with a specific product or a specific situation, there may be more complex values than those 9 that come into play. But those 9s are things like sense of accomplishment, self-fulfillment, being well respected, security, those kinds of things.
Okay, very interesting, very interesting. So if I want to market my product, my company, or my service, I should reflect upon these values and decide, okay, which of them could I satisfy? Is that the right path that I should take?
Right. And if you can link your product or service to a particular value, it's going to be more effective. So if you imagine an advertisement for a cold remedy. And if you say this cold remedy remedies colds, that's good. People will like that. They'll think, oh, that's doing what I want it to do. But if you can tie it to a more fundamental value, it's going to be, your marketing is going to be more effective. So if you can say you value motherhood and this cold remedy will make you a better mother, then this is the motherhood cold remedy. That will be probably a more effective ad than just saying this cold remedy remedies colds.
Yeah. That's a very interesting take, because I talked to someone from the ad agency because you said mother, I remember. It was like these instant soups, where you just put the powder into the cooking water and you have the soup finished and everything. And they made sure to have a happy family in that video, in the ad, because they said, we don't go for convenience. Convenience is something for other people. We want to have the mother decide she's a good mother if she uses this product. She has no time. We know she has no time, but we want her to associate our product with being a good mother and taking care of her family. And that's why she's taking this soup. And it's really interesting that you say that. I think many people in the marketing field try to come up with such ideas. What would you say? Is it better to focus on one value, or is it better to say, oh, great, maybe my product covers 5 of these 9 values? Would it be better to communicate more of them, or is it better to focus on just 1 or 2 of these values? What do you say?
I think it's better to focus on 1 or 2 values, but the issue in marketing also is segmentation. The different people have different values. So if you value sense of accomplishment and I value fun and enjoyment in life, you're going to take the same product, but you're going to promote it differently based on the values. So for you who values sense of accomplishment, I'm going to talk about how the computer that I'm trying to sell does a terrific job of word processing and a terrific job of accounting, and it has great access to software that'll make your business more productive. And for me, who values fun and enjoyment in life, I'm going to talk about how the same computer is great for video games, and you can do all sorts of fun things and access cool websites based on this computer. So, it's the same product, but for you and for me, where we're different segments, you'll emphasize different values.
There, we're already knee deep in it because it's so interesting to talk with you about it. I've got an interesting question there, because as I take it, with the digitalization, the social media, and how ads have changed and how the whole marketing field has changed, it's become easier to target the different segments with the different ads and the different messages. For example, if you compare 20 years ago, you put a TV ad out, and it's at 8 p.m. during a movie, and whoever sees it sees it. Nowadays, we can segment it better with, okay, this ad is going out only for females. This ad is going out only for males between 20 and 30 years, and so on. So do you see changes in the marketing field because of this digitalization? Is the segmentation easier or harder? Or what do you think about what it's become like, the changes in the last 20 years or something like that?
Yeah, well, certainly segmentation can be more complex now than it was 25 years ago. That, you're absolutely right. When you had a few TV networks, you basically were marketing to everybody. And now markets can be extremely segmented. You see this in political campaigns where they literally will figure out what your most important issue is and what your stand on it is, and then send you an ad saying, this politician agrees with you on this issue that you think is so important, and ignore everything else. So the targeting can be so much more precise in our digital world than it was in a broadcast world.
Yeah, it's also well, and there comes then the creative question, because instead of doing one ad, as you say, in these political campaigns, for example, you create 200 ads for these 200 different segments, and each of the videos or texts or pictures presents another point that is made for each of these segments. It's really interesting, really, really interesting with the values, as you say. I would like to ask a bit about the value, attitude, behavior hierarchy. It's like people have certain values and they act upon these values. Of course, status and how to present themselves in a social context is also important. It's like, how would you say, if let me rewind the question a bit differently. How much does marketing change the behavior, and how much is the behavior deciding what is marketed to the people? Do you know how much is the influence of one area to the other in that field?
I think mostly you have your behaviors and marketing just latches onto those. I don't think for the most part that marketing makes big differences. This has always been a tangle because advertisers like to say, oh, we don't change the world, we just capture the world. But then at the same time, they're saying our advertisements work, which would suggest that they do change the world a little bit. So there's a little of each, but I think in general, you can't really change a person's fundamental characteristics. On the other hand, I think that in different situations, people have different values. We did one interesting study in Singapore, and in Singapore, pretty much everybody is multilingual. Pretty much everybody speaks English, and pretty much everybody speaks Chinese. You could probably do that in Austria too, with German versus English. But in Singapore, we gave a survey, the value survey, twice, and we gave it once in English and once in Chinese, and we gave it to each group twice. So each group got the survey once in Chinese and once in English, and it turned out that the results were quite a bit different for the values that people said. And at first we thought, well, this must be a bad translation. We probably just didn't capture the Chinese very well when we translated from the English. But when we did a focus group and asked the people, what's wrong with the translation here? Well, they said, oh, no, the translation is great. The translation is perfect. The thing is, we're different people when we're talking Chinese than when we're talking English. When we're talking English, that's the modern world. That's the world at school and education and knowledge. And when we're talking Chinese, that's with our grandmother, and that's with 5,000 years of history. And so we have different core values when we're talking Chinese than when we're talking English. And I think for a lot of us, some of us may not talk multiple languages, but we recognize that in different situations, there are different demands for what you might say.
Absolutely, that's interesting. May I ask, because I made the experience marketing, for example, it's like a person using Facebook, it's the same person with the same values. Using Facebook reacts completely different to an ad than if they are on Instagram, for example, or if they are on LinkedIn, for example, because each of these platforms creates, I don't know if it's the right term, like a different persona, a different mindset they are in. So they react to different values, to different stimuli from outside. Could one say that
Absolutely,
that's something like
absolutely.
that?
You know, that LinkedIn has a different purpose than Facebook. And when you're talking on Facebook, you're probably talking to friends and family. And when you're talking on LinkedIn, you're probably talking to professional colleagues.
Uh,
What you do as a professional may be different from what you do as a family friend.
Interesting, because and you also go into these platforms with a different mindset. For example, when I start LinkedIn, I'm not looking for, okay, what are my friends doing, what is my family doing. It's like, okay, I'm doing research on my topic or in my industry, what's going on, da, da, da. So I react to, for example, a vacation picture very different, because I'm not in the mindset to filter these things out. I'm looking for something else. So that's a really interesting of framing. How do I frame how do we catch the person in the right frame of mind to make them accessible for the ad that or the message, the marketing that I want them to take? And how do these values that they react to change depending on the situation they are in? That's a really interesting question. Is there any way to find that out, test that, anything like that? Any research, any suggestions from your side?
Well, I certainly think that you can investigate what the context is and what's going on. Um, you know, one of the things that we've looked at is celebrity marketing,
Oh,
and when you're using celebrities, certain celebrities kind of trigger certain contexts or certain activities, and if you can again have the celebrity match the values that you're trying to promote, that can make the ad a little bit more effective.
yeah, where it's again it has to fit together. What happens if I don't find a good match?
Well, I
Right.
think you're wasting the communication if you don't have a good match.
Okay.
That, sometimes people like using, for example, very attractive women in ads,
Yeah.
and there's no doubt from the research that using an attractive woman draws attention to the ad.
Hmm.
But if the thing that you're using to get attention detracts from the value you're trying to convey and the information you're trying to convey, then you're fighting against yourself in the ad. If you're selling a product that's a beauty product, it makes sense to use an attractive model. If you're selling a product that has nothing to do with beauty, then it might be that focusing on one thing to get attention is actually distracting from the message that you're trying to get across.
Okay. That's a good lesson. That's a good lesson to not just care about attention, but to make sure that the attention you gain matches the value that you want to send to the viewers, to the audience, that they connect on an emotional level with the right value that you want them to perceive your product or your service to be fulfilling. That's interesting. Because usually, as you know, I don't know if you know, I'm sure you know it. Usually it's like, oh, you just need attention. You just need attention. That's the important thing. Just make sure you get the attention, everything else comes from alone. That's why your research was so interesting to me, where it was like, nah, it's not just attention. You need to make it align with the proper value. And that was a really interesting paper. Really, for
Yeah,
the
there's a
viewers that don't know, for the viewers
oh, I
that
was going to
don't
say
know,
there's a concept.
please.
There's a concept called the hierarchy of effects.
Yeah.
And the idea of the hierarchy of effects is that you have several hurdles you have to get over. It's like running a race. And
Mm,
you've got to get people's attention. Absolutely. If you don't have their attention, nothing else matters. But then you
mm,
also have to have them understand what you're saying and agree with what you're saying. And then they have to be committed to act on what you're saying and have a way to act on what you're saying. So, and any given ad has a lot of different things that it has to accomplish.
mm. I remember I've had that. I remember where volunteered for a charity organization for a while, They're like a food bank. They get donations for food and give it to poor people. And they had the issue for years that the message was accepted, the people liked the project, the organization, they thought it was cool, it was super, everybody was on the set, but they could not make the people remember the name of the organization. They could not, no matter what, they viewed the ad, it was like, oh, they're cool, they're great, everything, yeah, awesome, awesome. And when you ask, what's the name of the organization? Oh, I don't know. Oh, I forgot. Like really, 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 they had struggling hard because even the companies that donated food to them didn't remember the name of the organization. It was a bit because there are huge organizations in Austria that are like everybody knows them, and then as like with Google, it's like oh, I Google something, and then it becomes a word where even if you use something else, you still use Google. And that same was with the charity organizations here that you just use. Here it's the Caritas, and no matter what you do, if you're a charity, you're called Caritas, and that's just it. And they really struggled with that. So getting your own brand and your own name out there is important, really, really important. And I wanted to ask you, you made the difference between the VALS and the LOV. Would you elaborate a bit on that for the people that have not read your paper, research, or not that well versed in the theory of marketing? What are these different things?
VALS is another way of measuring values that is popular in some circles in advertising. I think it's a good approach, and I like it, but I think that the way that they measure VALS is not as tied to values as I would like it to be. So they ask a lot of questions that are sort of lifestyle questions that don't get at the core values. So lifestyles are important, but I think you need to distinguish between what is a core value and what is kind of a fading attitude.
Okay. Could you give some examples, a bit of elaboration on that topic? Like what questions, for example, would be asked where you say, I don't think that's the right way to ask, or not really that well tied to values?
Well, one question that they asked in VALS at one point was about the legalization of marijuana. And, legalization of marijuana, I don't know as much about Europe politics as American politics, but it's a controversial issue. And in some jurisdictions, you can get life imprisonment for violating the laws about marijuana. And in other jurisdictions, illegally parking your car is a worse offense than smoking marijuana, or maybe it's totally legal. And so if you ask somebody, what do you think about smoking marijuana? It depends a lot on what jurisdiction they live in. If you're going to get 20 years in jail for it, you maybe have a different opinion about it than if it's a recreational thing that you do at your party every weekend.
Okay, of course. Well, that's again, yeah, absolutely, because there we go again into the cultural difference. It's like if you would say, as you now use the Mariana thing, it's the same with, for example, advertisement on alcohol, where again there are countries where it's kind of no, you can't advertise alcohol because alcohol is like in the Arabian states or such is a very different thing than for us in the West. It's like you very differently treated and very differently seen. How would you go about, or what do you say? How could I find out what the values are? For example, I'm a company, I made my product. How can I find out? So, okay, what values should the CEO just imagine himself, make a brainstorming session like, oh, I think we captured this value, or is there a more scientific approach to find out which values does my product or my service cover? What would be the approach to find that out, in your opinion?
Well, certainly the CEO or the top executive should be thinking about what values they think they're serving, but then they ought to do marketing research where they have a survey of their target market and find out whether their views of what's important really conform to the views of the target market.
Okay.
I was involved in one project where somebody thought if you put little chunks of fruit in tea, it would be more authentic. It'd be healthier. And so the idea was to have fruit floating in tea. And everybody thought, oh, that sounds really great. That sounds healthy. That sounds like something people will like. And consumers said, no, we don't want chunks of anything in our tea. We want our tea to be pure. And that I've seen water pollution, and I don't want water pollution in my tea.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was important to do the research to find out intuitively whether what the executives thought was important, was indeed important to the consumers.
So data-driven is important. Get the feedback from the people, get the loop, find out. You have, as it is in science, you have a theory, you go out, or you hypothesis, you go out, and then you see, does it work or doesn't it work? Do I get the data? Is the data saying, yeah, the idea was good, the people like that idea, or is the data saying, no, that idea was like absolutely awful? I think, as I said, with the modern variants, it seems to be easier than ever before. It's just my opinion. Like, it seems easier to make a little ad campaign and see how do people react to this new product, to this new idea, to this new service that we are representing, or that we are preparing for the people to see. As, I don't know if you know, with the MVP, minimal valuable product, where I say, okay, here, just a test, throw it out, alpha version, do the people like it or not? And then get the feedback. What do they like? What don't they like about it? It's a very, very interesting time, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's easy to do research these days if you want to. And I think you usually should.
Yeah, do you think people or companies do enough of this kind of research in your experience?
I think some companies do, but probably on average, companies don't do as much research as they ought to find out exactly what people think.
Okay. Do you any idea why? Cost intensive, or don't you think about it? Or
it takes time and it costs money to do research. So there are ways today that you can do research very efficiently. There are companies that have online polls where you can just literally in half a day get a sample of people and get their responses to it and analyze the data and know what's going to work. So you don't have to do a 6-month-long study like you might have had to do 25 years ago.
and
it doesn't have to be that expensive either.
Yeah, that's what I think. It's really, really interesting, and I think it's a benefit for our companies, or especially for small, agile startups that seem to be more willing to test this stuff if they're data-driven and test this stuff out. But I want to talk to you about something else. You researched a lot in sports marketing, and I'm curious about a few research papers that you put out. Really curious about the people that you use for advertising as testimonials and so on. There are many different variables that decide how effective they are for your marketing. That's really, really has been interesting. You also tested if their attractiveness works and other variables. Can you elaborate a bit on that research that you made? That you did?
About what athletes to use as celebrities, or well, different athletes represent different things, and sometimes the same athlete represents different things. I was thinking Michael Jordan was a spokesperson, has been a spokesperson for Nike for basketball shoes. And if I want to be a good basketball player and Michael Jordan wants to tell me how to play basketball better, I'm all ears. I want to hear that. I recognize that he knows how to play basketball better than I do. And if he has a point that will tell me wearing these shoes will make you a better basketball player, I'm interested in that. Michael Jordan also does advertisements for Hanes underwear. And my opinion is that I know at least as much about wearing underwear as he does. And I'm probably as good at it. So I don't know that him telling me about wearing underwear is going to provide me a lot of new information that's valuable and going to change my mind about things.
I think you're speaking interesting topic. I read, don't remember from who put out the paper. Recently, it's not that recently, a few years ago, research about how dangerous it is for the brands of famous people, celebrities and such, to endorse specific products. And they tested it like for the European market, for the Japanese market, and for the American market. And they realized like if a huge Hollywood celebrity endorses a certain product, it's like cereals works in America, absolutely no problem as such. But if like Brad Pitt endorses a toothbrush, he loses his brand and his worth in the American market because people start to look at him as something lower. While in the Japanese market, it was absolutely no problem. The Japanese accepted no matter what kind of celebrity you were and no matter what kind of cheap product you promoted, it was all right. You did not lose your marketing value for like your movie when it comes out. So they really researched it on originalities and how the client, how the audience reacts to different celebrities endorsing the different stuff. So that was a really interesting paper for me where I started to think about that. Okay, it seems interesting that you can also lose value if you endorse the wrong products. So I don't know if you made any research in that value, but how can I'm really focused on these values because I think they're very interesting. It's really important. But it feels a bit foggy. How can I find out these values? Is the research, should I take 1,000 people and just ask them, for example, hey, this is a Coca-Cola, what do you feel about that? What do you connect with that? How can I do that if I've got a new product? Like, what celebrity should I take? What values should I use? Should I just test it? Should I just adapt it? How can I get the right values for the right marketing to put the right message out there? That's like how.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes with a new product, people don't really know what it is or know how to define it. If you have a totally original product, you might not even be able to ask people about it. You know, think about microwave ovens before anybody knew what a microwave oven was. You know, if you said it'll cook your food in 1/4 the time, and, oh, that's great. I love getting my food cooked more quickly, and it'll make things kind of brown. Your meat won't look the right color, and your vegetables will be really squishy. Then all of a sudden you're thinking, no, I don't really like this. So you almost have to have experienced a microwave to know what it can do and what it can't do. And once you know what it can and can't do, then you can talk about core values more quickly.
But can I choose my core values arbitrary? Can I say, oh, we're just gonna decide for our company, for our product, our core value is X, and we're gonna do the marketing for X no matter what the product is? Or is it like, no, there are specific things where it just does not work?
Well, there definitely are times when a particular value doesn't work for a particular product.
Okay.
You know, there are times when you just are not going to succeed by trying to say something happens when it doesn't.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, a lot of marketers, at least that I deal with, think they can convince the market with just shouting enough. You just need to invest enough money. You just need to shout enough to make the people believe whatever you want to say. Repeat the lie often enough and it becomes the truth. And that's why now that I'm able to talk with you, I would like to find out what is your opinion on this approach in marketing.
Yeah, well, to some extent, repetition does drive home a point, and to some extent, you can influence what people think about things, but there is a limit to how far that can go.
Okay. Interesting. And do you have any advice for the people in that field for clear communication of those values? Do you have any where you say, well, we found out this way, or this little trick works well to communicate values, to connect a certain thing to a certain value? Or is it just trial and error?
Yeah,
Or is there
I
more
think
like
when
a
you're
formula?
creating your ad, have your value proposition very
Yeah.
clear. What is the value that you're hoping your product will serve uh, on an abstract level? What is the core thing that somebody thinks is really important that you believe your product is trying to serve for this particular target market? And articulate that carefully. And then when you develop your ad, make sure that your ad follows that thinking.
Mhm. That's cool. I gotta ask, how did you get into the field of marketing research? Personally, I'm curious. How was your journey into that field? I'm curious.
Yeah, well, I started out studying psychology, and actually, my degree is in psychology, and then I became interested in consumer psychology, partly because I thought it was really interesting to look at how advertisers try to influence psychology, how advertisers try to reach people, and I thought a lot of the most practical attempts at changing the world are done by advertisers, sometimes for important topics, sometimes for seemingly trivial topics. Although, what is a trivial topic? If you're an executive at a company that sells something that people think is silly, but it has a huge market value, the economic consequences of it can be great.
Interesting takes. True. It's true. Absolutely true. Yeah. And so from psychology, how to marketing? Like just to jump over, was there a specific moment or was it like gradual?
Uh, there was sort of a specific moment. I started out, my first two jobs were in psychology departments, teaching in psychology, uh, and then I made a leap to marketing, um, and I think I discovered that marketing was doing really interesting things, and that maybe the type of psychology I did was more related to business than to psychology in general. And I'm still interested in general psychology, but um, applying the general psychology to a business context, I think gives a chance to test it more rigorously.
Huh? I think I personally think it's absolutely, as you said, a right field. Many people don't know that basically the I should say it like the invention of marketing was by psychologists. It was, after all, I think from Freud. I don't remember anymore if it was a nephew or a student or something, but it was someone who was closely connected to Freud and used the ideas of psychology and subconsciousness and such for purposes of selling products and making brands work. So that's how marketing started back then in the USA. That's how this word became even used. It's really, really interesting how intertwined psychology and marketing are. Whenever I talk to people seriously in like a consulting session or something about marketing, it's always, oh, but all of that is this psychology. You're talking about psychology all the time. It's like, yeah, good marketing is psychology plus data mostly. And then there's the sprinkle of creative stuff around it. But it's very, very grounded in data and psychology. So it's really
Well,
interesting to talk about that.
there is also the economic aspect. So, marketing is more than just psychology, but psychology is a really important part of it, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, you also have works about communicating sustainability for the green economy. I'm curious about a lot of companies, a lot of marketing right now is going into these green fields, SDG, and so on, the sustainability, da da da. What do you think about it in your research? What did you find about these topics, about the sustainability marketing?
Well,
How do
just from a point of view as a human being, I think we need to be talking about sustainability more. That it's going to be an important topic as time goes on, and so I'm eager to promote that. And some lack of sustainability is caused by marketing. Probably marketers create demand for things that are not sustainable, but marketers can also create demand for things that are sustainable. I think as marketers, we have a responsibility to try to produce good products that are good for the earth and good for people. Um, and we don't always do that. There certainly are a lot of examples of marketers claiming that they're doing something that's good for the environment when they really aren't. That's called greenwashing. Uh, but there are also some examples of marketers doing really good things that do promote the environment. So there is a advertising campaign in the United States from Cascade dishwasher soap, and they say if you wash your dishes by hand, you use more soap and you use more water than if you run them through the machine. And so you're actually doing something good for the environment by using your dishwasher. And that's absolutely true. And, when they promote that, they are indeed promoting a sustainability value. And it's an honest promotion of a sustainability value. So, my hat's off to them.
Interesting. So, do you think the average consumer nowadays is more conscious of these things in their buying decisions?
Yeah, some consumers are very concerned about it. Some consumers aren't concerned about it at all, or some consumers even reject it as a viable idea.
Okay.
But I think that there is a growing segment, especially among young consumers, that we need to think about the environment. We need to think about sustainability. We need to think about responsibility to the earth when we're developing products and when we're marketing products.
Mhm. Now that you said about, now that we're in the topic of like, it's not really, but like it's a nice segue to social issues, to social topics. What do you think about when something is happening? There are always things happening in the world. As a brand, as a mark, should I jump onto things that might match with the values, my core values as a company or as a product or service, or is it a dangerous thing to jump onto such things too soon, too easily? Like, I don't know, for example, now the Pepsi campaign that came out a few years ago, where it was like Pepsi, there were the protests in America, the riots, however you want to say it, and then Pepsi made that one commercial where the celebrity gives the Pepsi can to the police and to the rioters and to the protesters, and there was peace. And suddenly it was like the brand itself was laughed at, was criticized for doing such an ad, and so on and so on and so on. But on the other side, they got a lot of attention through that. What are your takes on advertising on hot topic daily political stuff to use as a method to get more attention? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it dangerous? What would you say?
It can work. It's tricky. This is again a place where you should do some marketing research before you get too heavily into it, to know how controversial is the topic that you're linking, and how does it relate to your target market versus not to your target market. So there've been some examples of people doing very edgy ads that get criticized a lot, but the people who are criticizing them are not their target market. And there are also examples where people seem to go a little bit too far and it hurts them. So it's a complicated topic. There's no doubt about it. But it can work. There are examples of times when companies have done really well with that, even when they've been criticized.
Well, that's an interesting take because, as you said, I think the other way around is also true, that you can get a lot of positive feedback, so to speak, from the critics, but your target audience that really buys your product says, no, we don't want that. Like, your ad is nice for these critics, for the whoever, but we as the consumers don't like what you did or your message here with the last ad. I think Gillette, for example, had such a thing a few years ago where like many males said, oh, we don't like this one ad that came out. And is it just me, or does it seem like in the USA it's getting harder, more political and more. There now it's always something is going on with some kind of ad, with some kind of company. It's always some kind of political issue. Does it just seem like that to me as a European, and am I making a mistake, or is it really getting hotter in your marketing divisions in your country, if I may ask?
Well, I think that dealing with a controversial topic probably gets you attention. And the more controversial the topic, the more attention it gets you. And it depends on how that topic plays out with your target market. So, there's a black quarterback in football in the United States who was more or less who was protesting unfair treatment of black people. He was condemned by a lot of people for what he did, and in fact, he's not succeeded at getting a job as a professional player, even though his abilities suggest that he should have a job as a professional player. Nike signed him up as an endorsee, and a lot of people criticized Nike for doing that and said they weren't going to buy Nike anymore. But they were also people that weren't buying Nike anyway. And among the people who were athletes, the idea of celebrating his talent was perceived as very positive. So Nike got criticized a lot for doing that controversial ad, but with their target market, they got praised, and in fact, their sales went up as a result of that ad. So it was a great idea. There are some other instances where companies have taken stands that offended their target market, or kind of pushed the limits for their target market, and it hurt them. So it can go both ways. You really need to understand who cares about the issue and how much does somebody care about the issue.
Yeah, and really, really tough question sometimes to find the right answer for that. I mean, we've got to admit there are multi-billion-dollar companies, and even they make mistakes. It's a tough game out there to. On the other side, if you always play it safe, maybe you don't get the attention that you need to grow bigger. That's again, this always playing safe seems to be, maybe then you don't get any attention and you're overlooked all the time. That's a tough thing. That's why I'm so curious about. That's why your work was so interesting to me, with these values, with the social status, with how people react to these different things. What is a product? What is a service? What are the values that they have? And how does it resonate with the different things? And how I can get them to hook into exactly the kind of value that I want them to perceive to be with me. And if I may now ask something, I'm not sure if I'm going too deep with that question, but like, do you have any idea why the people have exactly the values that they have? Is there any explanation for that, do you think?
Well, we've looked at that, and some of it has to do with what were the values of your parents. What if you have a religion, does that play a part in what values you develop? Or even for people who don't have a religion, they have usually some societal values. I think religious and non-religious people agree that murdering folks is not a good thing in general. I mean, there are a few people that disagree with that, but for most of us, we have sort of a set of civic values that we share, and certainly country values that we share. So governments can play a role in what values you have, and other people. You observe what other people have, and you're trying to get along in the world, so you pay attention to what other people in the world think. Sometimes when you change social groups, for example, you graduate from college and you go to work in a corporation, you notice that the values are different among corporate executives than they are among college students, and you may modify what you think based on that. But you're always trying to summarize what are the main values of the world around you so that you can succeed in the world around you. Um, and but
So there
I
is
think
so there is an element of conformity in it also, like we're social creatures, so of course it's like if we go evolutionary, it's important to adapt to the tribe that you're with. After all, you need to have some kind of semblance to the values of the tribe that you're around with, because you need them to accept you in some kind of way to survive. Would that be a good take on that?
yeah, that's a good example. That's a good um, description. And of course, many of us are in several different tribes. So you know, which tribe matters the most, and uh, when does one tribe matter and another tribe matter is a question also. I think we don't know as much about where values come from as we would like at this point. So it's an interesting topic to pursue for the future.
Absolutely. And talking about the future, is there any research you're working on, any book you might be writing, anything we can expect from you in the future? If you're willing to tell us that, I'm just curious.
Uh, well, right now I'm working on a project on services marketing and
Oh,
what is important in services marketing. And our concept is that emulation is really important in services marketing, that if you're promoting a service, you ought to display what it is that's important about your service in a way that people are reminded, oh yeah, that's why I like this service. Oh yeah, that's why I care about this.
hmm. May I ask there? Now I'm curious. I'm a bit curious. If I try to pinpoint, okay, what is the important part about my service? Should I go for a negative or a positive? Should I say, for example, it's important to protect X, or is it better to gain Y? What works better, the positive or the negative pool, and how, and should I concentrate even as a service on these 9 values that you have listed before? That for By the way, for the people who watch this video, down in the description below will be the link to the papers, to the work, so you can read about it in more detail, so that you don't have to re-listen to this again and again, because it's really interesting papers, really interesting topics. I think it was more than valuable to me to read that and to learn that. So sorry, I'm talking so much. Let me ask again. Should I go with the positive or the negative, usually on average? Or do you say completely different? Depends.
I think in general, the positive works better in the long run than the negative.
Okay.
That usually people are looking for cues about what they should do.
Interesting.
It depends on what you're trying to accomplish, but in general, I think the positive is better than the negative.
Okay. Okay. Interesting take. Interesting, interesting, interesting. Really, really interesting. There was a lot that you talked about that I will have to reflect upon, because it's really, really tough. A lot of market research, a lot about the values that one has to go through, that you have. Because I'm working with a few startups every now and then, and it's like, oh, what is your target audience? Oh, we don't know. Well, what is your, what is your perfect customer? Oh, we don't know. And it's like, what are your values? What? Oh, we don't know. Well, what do you do? Oh, we've got product X. So the question is, how do you translate product X to the human need, to the human needs that the human has to communicate well? And that's the next step, to communicate well. Listen, product X gives you or helps you with value Y, this and this way. And then to communicate that effectively in the market, where a lot of people want to communicate and send messages. And then to stand out with your message in that hall of people screaming around, because a little bit that's kind of what marketing is. It seems to me, at least. What I hope you would say.
There's a
Yeah,
quote that I like from
away from.
Gloria Steinem, which is, "You can tell a lot about people's values by their checkbook stubs." And I think a more modern version of that quote might be by their spreadsheets of how they spend their money. But
Yeah.
the idea is that what you do with your money tells a lot about what you think is important as a human.
I'm sorry, I don't know how much time we got, but that question, that point makes me curious now. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it as a research, but maybe you have just a personal subjective opinion on that. Because I think a lot of people spend a lot of time, a lot of money in a not conscious way. Like not every purchase is a consideration in, oh, I've got so much money and in my budget I have to buy this product or this service or that. But it's with a lot of stuff, it's subconscious, just, oh, I want this. Oh, I thought of that. Oh, it's like, how much is it just a moment, suddenly it's there, so I buy it? And how much is it? No, you're primed subconsciously already to buy it, and you have these values, and it's not on accident that you buy your Uber Eats the fifth time this month or this week, or it's not, it's not, how should I say it? It's not on accident that you're in another club again partying, or that you're again drinking out, or that you're buying books. Even if for you as an individual, you think, oh, it was just I was walking around at the store and I saw this. It was an action. It was a price game thing. I wanted to take it, and to you it seems like a impulsive thing. But how much of that is really already hard coded into you because of these values, and how much of that is really just impulse in that moment? Do you?
Well, I think a lot of momentary impulses are still driven by your core values. That if you're getting things on your shopping list and you do not have fresh strawberries on your shopping list, but you walk past fresh strawberries in the store and you think, oh, those look really good. You probably have some value for having fresh fruit, and you decide to buy the strawberries, even though they were not on your list and even though they were not something you planned to buy, because you do like fresh fruit and you do like taking advantage of things in the season when they're available. So and a lot of times you do something once very consciously, and then after that you do it, you just repeat. So, how much time do you spend reading the labels of products to know exactly what's in them? You don't do that every time. Most of the time when you go to the grocery store, you just grab whatever it is off the shelf. But maybe there was one time when you did spend some time looking at the ingredients and said, does this have ingredients that I like? Does this have the ingredients that are good for me? So I think even when you make impulsive decisions, sometimes they reflect core values that you have.
I don't know how much time you've got. Are you ready on, or can I ask a bit more? Because I don't want to put you into a troublesome position.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Because you just reminded me of something. Because as you said, well, maybe it's just because of habit. And now I discussed it with someone from a big retail company, grocery store company from Austria, like big, one of the 4 major companies. And an interesting aspect was the question of, why do people use your product? Like it was an in-house brand thing. And then there was a discussion created, and was like, the people think it's all about the marketing, all about the advertisement that is made, and so on and so on. Of course, marketing tells you it's the marketing. The company does the ads, so they want this to work. And when I talked to some of the customers, because I set up shop door there, and I made like a little bit of, hey, I want to ask you something. Can I write down your name and your opinion and so on? It was like many of them just used this kind of brand for like butter, or like, butter, the food store, because they grew up with that brand. So no matter what the ad says, no matter what the marketing does, it just, their parents bought this product. Now they're used to this taste. And so they're lifelong customers now. maybe they can be convinced to change that if something happens and so. But usually people seem to be quite brand loyal if they are, if they are brought into the brand very soon or very early and by these huge emotional moments. So can you explain that a bit, or is there something in your research that explains that? With how much do the values matter in this? Or let me rephrase it. How much do I, as a marketer, decide the values that the person perceives with the brand, and how much is it just their lived experience and their nostalgic memories or situations that happened that override all of my marketing with their emotional connection of value to the product and brand?
Yeah, I don't know if I can give a quantitative answer to that,
Oh,
but
just a
you're
subjective opinion, isn't it? Huh?
but you're absolutely right that there are habits that we develop that,
Mm,
again, maybe the first time you bought a product, you thought carefully about it. Maybe what you thought about it was, this is the brand my mother bought, so I'm going to buy it too, because my mother knew what she was doing. And sometimes that's reasonable, and sometimes it's not. You
mm,
know, a lot of people I know say, well, I buy the same laundry detergent that my mother bought, and she thought it was good, so I think it's good too. And the truth of the matter is that the laundry detergent company is changing their chemical formula a little bit every year. When they say it's new and improved, they do mean that they've changed something. So the product that you're buying now may have the same branding, but it's a completely different product than what it was when your mother bought it. But still, you trust that brand. So once you've trusted the brand, you continue to trust it. Or think of automotives, that you've always bought one brand of car, and your family has always bought that brand of car. Almost certainly, the car that you're buying now is different than the car that was bought 25 years ago. In virtually every way. But you still trust that one company until the company lets you down. As soon as the company does something that triggers your reassessment motives, then you may rethink whether you want to continue using that brand.
Interesting, interesting. Because you researched quite a bit in the sports field, I thought maybe you have some experience with that. Because as far as I know, just nothing quantitative, no research or anything, just anecdotal evidence. It was like many people that I know that are huge fans of specific sports teams are fans because their father took them to a game of that team, and then you're like, okay, now I'm a fan of that team for the rest of my life. I've been a fan 20 years and so on. And then they take the little kids with them to the same team. And so it's like a generational thing. And I thought maybe that's why I wanted to ask you this question, because I thought, okay, if someone knows about that, usually the one who can give me information.
Yeah.
Well,
And, when you change teams that you root for, maybe the team has done something wrong, that they've had some players involved in scandals, or they have suddenly become a losing team instead of a winning team.
mm,
But you're right. In general, when people develop a fan base for a particular team, they tend to be loyal to that team unless something drastic happens that makes them rethink that.
it's really, really, really interesting. Professor Kahle, I thank you very much. I know I've already taken too much time. We are already over time. I thank you very much for you taking this time, being a guest here. It was an awesome interview. Guys, I want you all to know, read the papers. Everybody who's got a company, who's got a startup, or who's in marketing, you will benefit reading it. You will benefit from the information. It's really awesome papers, really great. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here. Really, it was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's been delighted talking to you.